Hi, I'm Jesse Fuchs, and welcome to the Guts of Glory Rules video. Guts of Glory is a mouth-cramming, deck-spewing competitive card game for 2 to 4 players set in the post-apocalypse. In Guts, players vie to be the first to attain 7 glory points by taking turns filling the plate, feeding a card, and then chewing and swallowing cards. You can play with 2 to 4 players, using as many mouthboards as players, and with a deck made of 5 food cards and 7 condiment cards per player shuffled together. If this is your first game, we recommend playing a designed starter deck, which you'll find referenced in the printed manual. Each card has a number of potential properties, doing at least one of these 3 things: giving you glory on swallow, activating an effect on swallow, or passively activating an effect each turn just by being in your mouth, whether they are being chewed or not. Every single card in the game has a toughness value, referenced by the number in the black chew on the upper right-hand corner of the card. This is the number of chew tokens that must be placed on the card in order to swallow it. Each card is also either a food or condiment, denoted by the color: blue for foods, green for condiments. It's also worth noting that every food in the game has a glory coin on it, while no condiments ever do. Condiments are typically power cards, while foods can be thought of as typically point cards. This doesn't mean no condiment can ever give you glory, however, as you'll see soon, and some of the food cards do have powers of their own. Each mouthboard is divided into 5 spaces for cards. The outer 2 spaces, on the teeth, are reserved for food cards, while the inner 3, on the tongue, are reserved for condiments. No condiment can ever be placed in a food space, or vice versa. Now, shuffle the cards together and place them face down on the deck spot on the board. Play begins with the hungriest player. If none is the hungriest, play begins with the angriest player. Each player's turn begins with filling the plate up to its 3-card maximum. Then, they feed 1 card. Players must put a card from the plate into their mouth each turn, regardless of whether they have room for that card or not. If players have a valid space to place a plated card in their mouth, they simply take it and move on to the chewing phase. Remember that cards can only be placed in the appropriate slots. So if a plate contains only food cards, for instance, and a player already has 2 foods in their mouth, they will be unable to feed as normal, regardless of whether or not their condiment spaces are empty. Players without room for a card must make room by spewing a card to the player on their left. Note that when a card is spewed at this time, it must be of a type that allows the spewing player to immediately feed from the plate. When a card is spewed, it is removed from the spewing player's mouth. It retains its chews, but also accrues 1 glory card, as it is more glorious to eat something from someone else's mouth than to eat something off of a plate. This glory will be awarded to the player who ultimately swallows the card. The receiving player is then offered the spewed card. If the player has room in their appropriate mouth space to take the card, they must accept it. If there is no room for the card, the player may decline the card, ending the spew chain, or they may counter-spew a card from their own mouth to make room for the originally spewed card. This counter-spewed card gains a glory card as well, and is then offered to the next player on the left, who follows the same procedure. This continues until one player declines. After the player has managed to feed, and all spews have been resolved, they move on to the chewing phase. The first part of chewing is to take chews from the chew pile. By default, players take 2 chews, although certain card powers may alter the number of chews players receive. These chews must be distributed to cards in the player's mouth, if legally possible. Only 1 chew may be placed per card per turn, unless players have a power like double chew, which allows for 2 chews to be placed on a single card in a single turn. It's worth noting here that on the first turn, players will almost never be able to place their second chew, simply returning it to the chew pile. Any card with a number of chews on them equal to their toughness is swallowed immediately, even before the player chooses to place the rest of their chews. If the card was worth any glory, points are accrued. If the card had any swallow effects, these take place immediately. Swallow effects vary widely, ranging from clearing the chews off of an opponent's card, to force-feeding other players, to warping the very fabric of space and time. After all of the player's chews have been placed, and all effects and points have been resolved, the player's turn ends, and play continues to their left. The game ends immediately when one player has been awarded 7 glory, and is thus the Guts. Thanks, and enjoy the game.